He thought she was just an old lady driving home late at night. What he didn't know? She was one of the highest judges in the country, and she was about to teach him a lesson no badge could shield him from. Gloria Hemmings didn't like driving at night anymore. Not because she was scared, Gloria didn't scare easy, but because her eyes weren't as sharp these days, and Marvin, her late husband, always used to handle the wheel after dark. Now it was just her and her steady old sedan humming down a quiet Georgia road, winding through pine trees and patches of farmland like she'd done 100 times before. The air was thick with summer humidity, the kind that stuck to your skin even with the windows cracked. She had one hand resting lightly at 12 o'clock, the other adjusting the breeze just right. The only sounds inside the car were the soft buzz of insects from outside and the occasional rattle from a loose dashboard vent. On the passenger seat, a Tupperware dish of peach cobbler and a paper plate wrapped in foil. Bernice, her sister-in-law, never let her leave empty-handed. "You're getting too skinny, girl," she'd said, loading her up after Sunday dinner. It was a good evening, peaceful, simple, until the headlights showed up in her rearview mirror. At first she didn't think much of them. People drove fast on this road. But then they stayed close, too close. The kind of close that didn't feel casual. A minute passed, then another, and then, with no warning, blue and red lights erupted behind her, flashing like a sudden storm. Gloria's stomach tensed. She eased the car onto the gravel shoulder, signal ticking, tires crunching under the weight. Her hands were calm, practiced. She'd rehearsed this moment before, not because she expected trouble, but because she understood the world she lived in. She reached down slowly, placed her purse on her lap, and kept both hands on the wheel, just like she'd taught her grandson. Don't reach fast. Don't argue. Let them feel safe, even if you're the one who isn't. The patrol SUV didn't move for almost a full minute. Gloria could see the silhouette inside, tall, broad-shouldered, fiddling with something. Her heartbeat was steady, but she could feel her chest tightening with every second he sat there, doing nothing but watching. Finally, the door opened. A white man, late 30s maybe, stepped out with purpose. Buzz cut. Aviators, even though the sun had already dipped below the trees. He walked with that slow, coiled swagger, like he owned the ground he was walking on. He didn't greet her, didn't say his name. "License and registration," he barked, stopping just short of her window. Gloria, ever composed, looked up at him through the half-rolled-down glass. "May I ask why I was pulled over, officer?" "You swerved," he said flatly. "You been drinking tonight?" Gloria's voice was calm, firm. "No, sir. I haven't had a drink in over 20 years." He didn't believe her. She could see it in his eyes, the way they scanned her face like he was waiting for a twitch or tremble, like he wanted a reason. "You got any weapons in the vehicle? Controlled substances?" "No, sir." But he didn't move to take her documents, didn't ask again. He just stared. "I'm gonna need you to step out of the vehicle," he said suddenly, voice sharper now. "Am I being detained?" she asked, not confrontational, just clear. "Don't play games with me. Out of the car." Gloria inhaled deeply, slow, intentional. "Officer," she said, "I have identification I'd like to show you." "Later," he cut in. "Now step out." Her hand inched toward her purse. "Ma'am, don't reach." His hand went to his holster. Gloria froze, both hands up, fingers trembling slightly for the first time. "I'm not reaching for anything. My ID is inside my purse. May I show it to you?" There was a long pause, the kind of pause that makes time bend. Then finally, "Keep your hands where I can see them." Gloria nodded once. "You fit a description," he added. Of course she did. She didn't bother asking what description. Outside, the woods whispered with the wind, and the road remained empty. Not one car had passed since the lights first flashed. There was no one to witness this moment, just her, him, and the weight of his assumptions pressing down like gravity. He started to circle the car, slow and methodical. Her cane rested on the floorboard in the back. She hadn't needed it tonight, but part of her wished it was within reach. Not to fight, just to ground herself. "Where you coming from?" he asked from the passenger side. "My sister-in-law's house." "Late for a Sunday visit, don't you think?" "She had dinner waiting for me. We hadn't seen each other in a while." "You sure you weren't somewhere else?" he pressed, peering through her rear window. "I'm sure. You travel with anybody?" "No." "You ever been arrested?" "No." "You sure about that?" "I'm sure." He was fishing. That smug little pause after each question, like he was trying to break her rhythm, like he thought if he pressed hard enough, something would crack. But Gloria Hemmings had handled more pressure from a courtroom bench than this man could throw at her in a lifetime. She didn't crack. She didn't even blink. "You know," he said, stepping closer again, "most folks just cooperate. Makes things easier." "Easier for who?" she asked, voice low. He didn't answer. Instead, he walked back to his cruiser. Gloria watched his silhouette through the mirror. His movements were faster now, less composed. Something about her calm unnerved him. That scared her more than anything. Men like that didn't like being out of control. When he returned, he had something in his hand. Clipboard, maybe. Some form. But he didn't offer it. Didn't speak. He just stood there, staring. Then he said the words that made her fingers stiffen against the wheel. "Backup's on the way." The word backup hung in the air like a storm cloud that hadn't yet burst, but promised thunder. Gloria sat still, her hands resting gently on the steering wheel. Not clenched, not shaking. Just there. Quiet reminders that she was still in control of herself, even if everything else around her wasn't. The officer, he hadn't offered a name, hadn't asked for hers, moved again. This time, slower. Like a man waiting to see if his threat would land. But Gloria didn't flinch. She knew how these games were played. She'd seen them unfold 100 times over her career. Just never from this side of the badge. "You locking me out now?" he asked suddenly, trying her car door. It didn't open. "I never unlocked it in the first place," she replied softly. His jaw tightened. He took a step back and stood there, blinking, like the script he was following had just gone off book. Behind him, the road was still empty. Nothing but trees and shadows. Not even headlights in the distance. Whatever backup was coming, it wasn't in any rush. The officer returned to his cruiser again. Gloria watched him through the mirror, then turned her eyes to the dashboard clock. 9:16 p.m. She'd been stopped for nearly 20 minutes. And not once had he asked for her documents again. Not once had he explained, beyond a vague accusation of swerving, why she was sitting here in the dark on the side of a Georgia back road with a man who clearly saw her as less than human. She shifted slightly in her seat. The cobbler on the passenger seat had tilted. Some of the syrup had leaked from the corner of the Tupperware and was now sticking to the plastic bag beneath it. A small thing. But it grounded her, reminded her who she was. He finally emerged again, holding nothing but that same damn clipboard. But this time, his voice was different, sharper, tense. "You're being uncooperative," he said. Gloria tilted her head. "I haven't refused any lawful request. You didn't exit the vehicle when I told you to. You haven't explained why I was pulled over. I don't have to explain everything to you," he snapped, louder now. "This isn't a courtroom." That line, that one. Gloria watched his face the second after he said it. He regretted it. She could see it. A flicker of something real. Hesitation, maybe. Guilt? Number? Just the creeping awareness that he'd said too much to someone who suddenly didn't seem so ordinary anymore. She reached into her purse slowly, methodically. "Are you placing me under arrest?" she asked. "You're being detained for questioning." "Under suspicion of what?" He hesitated. That pause said everything. "I need you to get out of the car," he repeated, dodging her question like it had teeth. Gloria looked at him, then down at her lap, then back to him again. "May I take my bag with me?" "No sudden moves," he said. She nodded. Understood. With deliberate calm, she opened the flap of her purse. Her fingers moved like water, slow and visible. She pulled out a small leather case, closed it in her palm, then placed the purse back on the passenger seat. The air outside was thicker now, humid, but also tense, like the woods themselves were holding their breath. She opened her door, stepped out. Her cane was inside, but she didn't reach for it. Didn't need it, not now. She walked with the kind of posture that didn't ask for respect. It demanded it by existing. The officer motioned toward the front of her car. "Stand right there, face the hood." She did. Hands folded gently in front of her back straight like she was standing before a courtroom. The gravel shifted beneath his boots as he circled her again. He looked like a man trying to catch a lie in someone's breath. But Gloria said nothing, gave him nothing. He leaned toward the open door on the driver's side and peered in. Then, without asking, he opened the glove compartment. Gloria turned her head sharply. "That's an illegal search," she said calmly. "I have cause," he snapped. "No, officer, you don't." And that time, her voice had weight. Something in his eyes shifted. Doubt, maybe. Not fear. Not yet. But the realization that whatever power he thought he had, it was starting to slip. He slammed the glove box shut and stepped back toward her. "You got a problem with how I'm handling this?" he asked, hands on his hips. "Yes," she said. He raised an eyebrow. "Care to elaborate?" "No," Gloria replied. "But I think you'll understand soon." And that was when he asked the question, the one that would crack the entire moment wide open. "Who exactly are you?" She looked him in the eye. Then, slowly, she pulled open the leather case in her hand and held it up for him to see. Not tossed, not thrust, just presented. He took it with one hand, distracted, still cocky, until his eyes locked onto the seal. His mouth opened. His eyes flicked up to her face, then back down again. There, in gold and blue, it read, "Gloria M. Hemmings, Associate Justice, Supreme Court of the United States." His lips parted. No sound came out. But the silence? That said everything. The officer, Brandon Kessler, as Gloria would later learn, stood frozen. His eyes locked on the badge in his hand, lips parted, throat dry. Every muscle in his body tensed, as if realization had turned to concrete in his limbs. For a moment, it wasn't just embarrassment. It was something deeper, shock. You're on the Supreme Court?" he asked, voice suddenly thin, meek. "I am," Gloria replied evenly. She didn't raise her voice, didn't move. She didn't need to. Her words didn't echo. They landed. Kessler blinked twice. His mind scrambled. Gloria could see it happening, piece by piece. The memory of how he barked at her, how he'd hovered near his weapon, how he'd tried to open her trunk without consent. All of it rushing back like a confession he hadn't meant to write. I didn't know who you were," he stammered, handing the badge back with both hands now, like it was holy. Gloria raised one eyebrow. "Would it have made a difference if you did?" That question hit harder than the badge, and she saw it on his face. The pause, the internal collision between pride and guilt. He didn't answer. He couldn't, because they both already knew the truth. She returned the badge to her coat pocket and adjusted the lapel with calm precision. The movement wasn't for drama, it was ritual, a signal that she was back in full command. "I apologize," he muttered. It was, it was just a routine check. No, Gloria said. It wasn't. Her voice didn't rise, but it got colder, not icy, but clear, like the wind before a coming storm. Kessler opened his mouth again, searching for words, any words. But none came that could fix the moment. He was a man who'd pulled over a black woman late at night, dismissed her, threatened her, humiliated her, and now stood face to face with a person who held more power in a courtroom than he would ever touch. "You've had a long day?" Gloria asked, tilting her head slightly. He nodded dumbly. "Yes, ma'am. I imagine so. But see, I've had a long life." She let that sit, just long enough for the meaning to settle in. "Now tell me," she continued, "what exactly were you going to charge me with again?" Kessler swallowed hard. I wasn't going to. Suspicion of what? Of driving while tired? Of being too old for the road? Or was it just being who I am?" He didn't respond. The trees swayed gently in the distance. A cricket chirped somewhere nearby, but the space between them remained heavy, like the road itself had taken notice. "If I hadn't shown you that badge," Gloria said softly, "what would have happened next?" Still no answer. "You need to think about that," she added. "Not for me. For the next person you pull over. Maybe she doesn't have credentials. Maybe she doesn't have a name you recognize. Maybe she's just someone trying to get home after dinner with her sister." "I didn't mean to." "That," Gloria interrupted, "is the problem." Her tone didn't accuse. It didn't punish. It taught. You didn't mean anything, but your actions still meant something. Behind them, finally, headlights appeared on the horizon. A second patrol car, probably the backup he called. It was too late now. The moment had already shifted, the power already corrected. Kessler turned to glance at the approaching car, but Gloria didn't. She kept her gaze on him. "I wasn't afraid of you tonight," she said, "but someone else might have been. A younger woman. A teenager. My grandson." That landed like a gavel. "I'd like to go now," she said at last. He stepped aside immediately. "Of course," he mumbled. She moved to her car with the same grace she'd walked to the bench in D.C. 100 times before. She sat, adjusted the mirror, and paused for just a moment, her fingers resting gently on the steering wheel once more. Then she looked at him through the open window. "Remember this moment, Officer Kessler, not because of who I am, but because of who you almost made yourself into." She rolled up the window, shifted into drive, and pulled back onto the road with quiet, steady confidence. The night swallowed the taillights of her sedan. Behind her, Kessler stood alone. No sirens, no backup, no excuse. Just the echo of everything he hadn't said, too late to take back, too loud to forget. Gloria didn't speak to anyone about what happened that night. Not at first. She didn't call a reporter, didn't fire off a tweet. She went home, poured herself a glass of water, put the peach cobbler in the fridge, and sat on her porch in the quiet. But silence is never truly silent, not when the truth has weight. Officer Kessler, however, didn't have that same luxury. By the time he clocked out the next morning, the story had already begun to leak. The department had logged the stop in its system. "Routine traffic detail," he wrote. "No citation, no incident, a formality." That was the first lie. The second came when he failed to mention the credentials she showed him. But someone talked. Maybe it was the dispatcher who caught the unease in his voice when he called for backup. Maybe it was the second patrol officer who arrived too late, but caught the way Kessler avoided eye contact, flustered and pale. Or maybe it was someone in internal affairs, someone who recognized the name Gloria M. Hemmings and immediately thought, "Wait, the Justice Hemmings?" By 9 a.m., the department's chief was holding a sealed envelope marked urgent. By noon, it was no longer a question of if it would go public, it was when. Gloria received a call around 1:15 p.m. from a colleague in D.C. "I heard what happened," the voice said gently. Gloria sighed. "I didn't file anything." "I know, but that's not how these things work anymore." The story broke on a small local blog that evening, written not with outrage, but curiosity. The title was simple: "Was a Supreme Court justice racially profiled on a Georgia back road?" Within an hour, national outlets picked it up. Within 3, her photo was trending on social media. By morning, the videos started appearing. Not from the dash cam. Not yet. But from a gas station surveillance footage a mile away, time-stamped just minutes before the stop. Gloria's car, steady, driving normally, no sign of swerving, no erratic movement, clean, calm. Then came the department's official statement, or rather, the attempt at one. They called the stop procedural, said the officer, acted within protocol. But no one was buying it anymore. Not when footage showed Gloria standing with her hands calmly in front of her, while the officer hovered like a storm cloud ready to strike. Not when experts pointed out how clearly the stop deviated from actual policy. And especially not when the public learned who she really was. Headlines screamed, "Justice Hemmings profiled during routine stop." Respected Supreme Court judge pulled over without cause. Would it have made a difference if you knew? Her chilling question to a Georgia cop. By day 3, Kessler had been placed on administrative review. By day 5, the governor had issued a carefully worded statement about the importance of dignity and impartiality in law enforcement. And by the end of the week, Gloria had done one thing she hadn't planned on doing. She agreed to speak, not to CNN, not to the Times, but at her grandson's high school, where the auditorium was packed with students, parents, and teachers who all wanted to hear the woman behind the story speak for herself. She walked onto the stage in her quiet, commanding way. No robes, no gavel, just slacks, a blouse, and a presence that could calm oceans. "They didn't recognize me," she said, "and maybe that's the point." She told them about the road, the flashlight, the holster, the tone. "I wasn't scared for myself," she said. "I was scared for what that encounter would have looked like if I were someone else, someone younger, someone less practiced at keeping her hands still." She didn't call for outrage. She called for awareness. There are too many names we only learn after it's too late. Let mine be one you remember before anything happened. The applause was quiet at first, then it grew. Not because she demanded it, but because truth has a way of drawing noise even from the silent. And as for Officer Kessler, he gave a short interview weeks later. No uniform, no badge. Just a man in a chair with a nervous swallow. "I didn't mean to," he began. But even he knew it didn't matter anymore. Because now, the country knew who Gloria Hemmings was. And more importantly, they were paying attention. Gloria Hemmings didn't chase cameras. She didn't need to. Her story had already moved beyond her. It wasn't just a clip on the evening news or a trending tag. It became a quiet catalyst. Not because she demanded justice at the top of her lungs, but because she embodied it when it mattered most. In the days following the stop, she didn't give interviews. She didn't release statements. But the story didn't need her to speak. It carried its own weight. A Supreme Court justice, profiled on a dark Georgia road, forced to prove her worth not with her presence, but with her badge. The ripple spread fast. Departments across the region launched internal reviews. 2 counties passed emergency measures mandating body camera use during all traffic stops. Local precincts hosted sudden training sessions on bias, some performative, others sincere. But all of them traced back to that night. Officer Brandon Kessler resigned quietly. No apology, no formal hearing. His final note in the department record read, "Voluntary separation under review." His name faded from the headlines, but his actions didn't. Gloria didn't dwell on him. He wasn't the story. The real story was the mirror he held up and the country that finally had to look into it. She focused forward. She began traveling, not on press tours, but to community centers, libraries, high school gyms, places with folding chairs and flickering lights, places where people still held their breath when they saw blue lights behind them. In Birmingham, she told a crowd, "This wasn't about me being a justice. It was about me being a person." In Macon, she stood before a group of teenage girls who asked, "What do we do when they don't believe us?" She replied, "You stay calm, you remember who raised you, and you never let anyone else write your story." She visited precincts that welcomed her with side eyes and stiff postures. She spoke anyway. She didn't shame. She taught. Officers listened, some with crossed arms, others with lowered heads, and some with real questions, the kind that come from people ready to unlearn and begin again. She launched a pilot program with a law school, pairing criminal justice majors with civil rights mentors. She helped create a mobile legal clinic offering free education on citizens' rights during police stops. No fanfare, just real work. She also created a scholarship in her mother's name, not hers, for students who came from neighborhoods like the one she grew up in. Not just those studying law, but those willing to stand in uncomfortable rooms and say uncomfortable truths. The public moved on quickly, as they always do. But those who'd felt the sting of silence and suspicion, they remembered. They watched her walk without rage, speak without venom, and lead without needing to be loud. Almost a year later, she returned to Washington. She walked through the grand marble entrance of the Supreme Court with the same quiet authority she always carried. Her robe was folded over her arm. No entourage, no reporters, just her. The young woman at the security desk looked up and paused. "Justice Hemmings?" "Yes," Gloria said, smiling gently. "My little sister's writing her college essay about you." Gloria chuckled softly. "Tell her to make it good." Inside, aides straightened papers. A clerk nodded respectfully. She moved past them all, not in a rush, but in purpose. In her chambers, sunlight spilled across the hardwood floor. She placed her robe down, opened her notes, and sat. The weight of the moment wasn't heavy. It was familiar. She thought about that night. Not the fear, not the insult, but the clarity. The way injustice strips away titles and leaves you face to face with your values. She had nothing to prove, but she still had work to do. The courtroom filled. Voices hushed. Gloria rose. And as she had done so many times before, she looked out, lifted her chin, and said the only words that ever mattered at the start of any reckoning: "Let's begin." The headlines faded, but Gloria Hemmings's story didn't. It wasn't just a viral clip or one of those trending moments that come and go. It was something deeper, a quiet revolution in a quiet car on a quiet road that exposed something louder than any siren. She never sought fame. She didn't need to. Gloria's power wasn't loud. It didn't crash through doors. It simply stood there, calm, composed, undeniable. She never raised her voice. But when she spoke, people leaned in. In law schools, her name became a case study. In police academies, her encounter became a training video. In family living rooms, it became the story parents told their children when they explained why dignity can't be handed to you, only owned. But Gloria never called herself a hero. She didn't need a pedestal. She preferred porches over podiums, real conversations over applause. And still, she showed up, to classrooms full of curious kids, to town halls in towns where justice always arrived a little late, to community events where the microphones crackled and the chairs didn't match. She answered the same question over and over: "What do I do if it happens to me?" And every time she said it clearly: "Remember who you are. Breathe. Speak calmly. Move with care. but never shrink for their comfort. She didn't fight with fists. She didn't need to. Her mind was the sharpest tool in the room, and she used it. Her foundation grew quietly. Workshops for youth, rights, training for communities, scholarships, not in her name, but in her mother's, because, as Gloria often said, she's the reason I walked into rooms like I belonged there. As for Officer Kessler, he faded from the headlines just as quietly as he had entered them. There was no follow-up, no redemption arc, just a resignation letter and a lesson he never saw coming. But that wasn't the story that mattered. The real story was this: that when power met presence on that roadside, presence won. That when disrespect knocked, dignity answered, and it didn't flinch. One spring afternoon, nearly a year later, Gloria walked back into the halls of the Supreme Court. No cameras, no reporters, just the rhythm of her steps echoing through the marble. At the security checkpoint, a young officer looked up, eyes wide, respectful. "You're Justice Hemmings, right?" Gloria nodded. "My cousin just got into law school because of you," the officer whispered. Gloria smiled. "Then tell her to keep going. The system doesn't change from the outside." She walked into chambers. No one needed to announce her. Everyone already knew. She took her seat. The bench felt solid beneath her hands. She breathed in, not to calm herself, but to honor the air she refused to give away to fear. She opened her notes, and she spoke the words that weren't just procedural. They were a promise. "Let's begin.